All right, so we're recording right now. I'll switch over to Photoshop and let me know if you can see Photoshop. Everybody see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Yes,
all
me
right.
too.
So this image might look a little bit familiar because we started it last week. We worked on warping this, removing this young model from her previous background and placing her in this new background. We applied a cast shadow to her, and we changed the angle that she's looking by using a warp feature. So now we're going to continue on, and we're going to finish out this magazine cover by adding the text. So in this lesson, we'll cover how to use guides to position text in a composition. We'll learn how to make a clipping mask from type. We'll learn how to merge type with other layers. We'll preview some fonts, format some text, distribute text along a path, and that's what you see right here. So what happened is we created a path, or we will create a path, and then you can create type that follows whatever the shape of that path is. We'll distribute type or text along a path, and we'll control type and positioning using some advanced features. So type in Photoshop is all made up of vector-based shapes. So far in this class, we've been working with bitmap images, which are made up of pixels. You're going to learn a little bit more about vectors in the upcoming weeks. Vectors are originally, they were mostly used in programs like Illustrator because they're more of a drawing function. But they produce very crisp edges, and they can be scaled up or down, and they'll retain their crisp edges no matter how you change the size. So a number of years ago, Adobe incorporated some of the vector tools into Photoshop so that you didn't necessarily have to leave Photoshop in order to work with vector tools. So some of you are taking the Illustrator class, and in Illustrator you're working almost entirely with, well, not almost, you are working entirely with vector type images. So this should look somewhat familiar to you. Many typefaces are available in more than one format, and you'll see as you dive into these fonts. When you add type to a document, the characters are composed of pixels, and they're going to have the same resolution as the image file. So as you zoom in on characters, you're going to see jagged edges. However, Photoshop will preserve the vector-based type outline, and will use those when you scale or resize type. Whenever you save that an image with text as a PDF or an ESP file, it'll also save the vector-based outlines, and if you print, they'll be crisp. So in this lesson, we'll start with the artwork that we created in lesson 6, but don't worry if you don't have that, because in your lesson file, you have that file. So the cover has a model, has her shadow, and the orange background. Okay, the first thing we're going to do, of course, always is save this as a working file. So I'll save this as 07, oops. And save it wherever you like to save those. My favorite place is on the desktop so that I can get rid of it later. And make sure you save it as a format, or as a Photoshop file, so that you preserve your layers. We'll create a clipping mask from type first. And a clipping mask is an object or a group of objects whose shape will mask other artwork, so that only the areas that lie within the clipping mask are visible. So in effect, you're going to clip the artwork to conform to the shape of the object or mask. And in Photoshop, you can create clipping masks from shapes or letters. In this one, of course, we're going to use letters. This file has 2 layers. It has a background layer, which is going to be the foundation for the typography, and it has the model layer. So if you're not already, if you can't already see everything on your screen, you want to make sure you fit the image on the screen so you see the whole cover. And then we want to set some guides for placing our type. So we want to make sure that we can see our rulers. If you can't see your rulers, go up to View and go down to Rulers and make sure that there's a check mark next to it, and then you'll have rulers. If your rulers are not already set to inches, you can change that in your preferences. And you'll do that under Units and Rulers, and you'll see that in this little dialog box, if it's not already set to inches, you can set it to inches. And that's what we want for this particular file. So when you drag out guides, all you do is click on the ruler and hold down your mouse and drag, and that will create a guide. So we're going to place this in the center, which is at 4 1/4 inches. So we'll just maneuver it right in there. There we go. So now you can see this kind of fluorescent pink guide. It won't show up in printing or in the finished file. It just is here for your convenience and to align things. Now you can add horizontal type in Photoshop, or you can add vertical type. We're going to add horizontal type, so we want to make sure, and that's usually the default, we want to make sure that that's what we're choosing. And then if you look up above in the option bar, you'll see that you have some choices that have to do with type. So we want to choose a serif typeface. There are 2 types of typefaces, serif and sans serif. And serif is when you have the little horizontal bars at the bottom. So Palatino, if you can see that, is a serif. Let's see, sample or capitals is a serif. Some of these fancier types are sans serif. A body is sans serif. So kind of look through and get used to identifying serif versus sans serif. And then choose a serif typeface like Minion Pro, and that's what I'm already on, so I'll just leave it at that. And then the next box asks which type, which variation of Minion Pro do you want? And what I would like is regular. So I'm going to choose regular here. And then for the size, there are some choices you can just scroll down and pick, or you can type in a specific size. I want 144 pixels, or sorry, points. And then as soon as I type that in, I'm going to press enter or return, and that will set my type size. And then over here, I want to center my text inside this box. And now there are some panels that have to do specifically with fonts and type, and I want to see the character panel. So if it's not showing up over here, I'm going to go ahead up to my window, and I'm going to choose character, and you'll see that a character panel that is nested with the paragraph panel will pop up. And in this, I have a few more options. So these right here are specific to characters. They're terms that come from the print world when people used to set type, like kerning and tracking. So and leading. So if you're not familiar with these, just hover over the little icons and you'll see where you can set the tracking. And what we want is 100. And that just sets the overall space between each letter. So we're spreading it out a little bit. Okay, and then you want to click on the center guide that we just drew to place an insertion point, and then we'll go ahead and we'll type digital. So already when I click there, there's some filler text, but it's already highlighted, so whatever I start typing will replace this. And sorry, I'm trying to get my textbook. There we go, so that I can type and talk at the same time. And you can move your text afterwards. So I'll go ahead and commit this text, and then I will select my move tool because I started a little bit high, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that down so that we can see it. Now, when I did that, as soon as I typed in that word, a new layer appeared, and it's already named. It's named the word that I typed, digital. So you can edit this layer and you can manage it as you would any other layer. You can add or change the text. You can change the orientation of the type. You can apply layer styles and transformations. You can create masks. You can move this layer. You can restack it. You can copy it, just as you can for any other layer. So the text is plenty big, but the editors would like this to be a little bit more modern. So we're going to go ahead and change this font to a more modern font. So make sure you're on, if you change tools, you want to go back to that horizontal type tool and then double click it, and it will select everything in that line. And then go ahead and open up the font family pop-up, and you can see as you move over, oh my goodness, okay, it's, my gosh, okay, there we go. As you move over the fonts, it changes, you get a preview, kind of a live preview. So you can kind of see it in context. And you could move this, you could collapse the character panel, and you could move, if you wanted to see the whole thing, you could move your image over to the right and so on. But we're going to go ahead and stick with Myriad Pro, which is right up here. And we want to make that semi-bold. And that looks a little bit more modern, so we're happy with that. But I'm going to go ahead and select the move tool again, and I want to adjust the movement, or the so that it's at the top and centered like that. And then we'll save our work. Okay, so if you didn't notice, I am working, the word digital is over the model, and I want it to be behind the model. So if I had clicked on my background layer before I started typing, this text layer would be directly above the background layer. But since I forgot to do that, I can just drag that text layer down underneath the model, and now it's where it should be. So we added these letters in black, which is the default text color, but we want these letters to be filled with the image of a circuit board. So now we're going to create a clipping mask of these letters that will allow another image that we have, the circuit board file, to show through. So if it isn't already open, you would open up the circuit board TIFF file, which is also in the Lesson 7 folder. And then I want to click over to the circuit board, and with my move tool, I would like to move it over to the background layer of the working file. Now, if I hold down Shift while I move this, it will put it right into the center of the working 07 working file. So I'll do that. I'll just hold down Shift, and now I am dragging this over, and I'll let go, and it will be in the center of the image. Now I have a new layer, layer 1, and this layer contains the image of the circuit board. But we're going to do a couple things to this layer before we're finished and we move on to creating the clipping mask. So it's currently a little large for this, so we can go ahead and close the circuit board TIFF layer. We don't need that anymore. And in this file, with layer 1 selected, we'll go up to Edit, Transform, and we're going to scale this. So we'll just choose Scale, and when I do that, you'll see that a bounding box pops up, and it has these corner handles. So I'm just going to, I just want to hold down Alt or Option as I scale, and that will keep everything in proportion. And I just want to, I kind of want to size it just a little bit larger than the text. And then I want to reposition it so that it is, actually it covers the text right now. And then I can commit that transformation by clicking up here or by clicking anywhere away from the circuit board layer. And then because I like to be organized, I'm going to go ahead and change this layer name to circuit board. Oops, it wouldn't help if I spelled that right. And make sure you stay on that circuit board layer, and then you'll see that it's just above the type layer. So we're going to clip it to the type layer. We're going to go up to the little layers panel menu right here, the horizontal lines at the top of the layers panel, and we want to create a clipping mask. So when we do that, you'll see that there's a bounding box around the thumbnail. There's a downward facing arrow pointing to the text layer. And now that circuit board layer is clipped to the text layer, and the only part of the circuit board we're seeing is the word digital. Now we're gonna, we want to, let's see, add an inner shadow, give this a little bit more depth. So we will now select the digital layer, and we will add a layer style by going down here to the FX button, which is the layer style button, and we'll just choose inner shadow. You get a new pop-up menu, and you'll see that inner shadow has a check mark next to it, and it's also highlighted. When it's highlighted like this, you get the menu here, the options that are specific to inner shadow. And so within this option dialog box here, we want to make sure that the blend mode is multiply, and you'll see there are a couple different ones, and you can kind of experiment a little bit. You know, you can see what it looks like if you choose, you know, color dodge. But what you want for this is multiply. And we will set our opacity at 48% if it isn't already there. We want our distance to be 18 pixels. So again, feel free to experiment. You want to see what this does. So go ahead and drag the slider before you blindly follow along with the book. What happens if you change the choke? We're going to leave it at 0. And what happens if you change the size? Grab hold of that. So we'll set these all at what the book has, 16, and then we'll say OK, and those that inner shadow is applied. And now is a good time to save your work. Okay, the next thing we need to do is create some type on a path. So type on a path follows a path that you create with a pen tool or one of the shape tools. In the direction that the type flows depends on the order in which the anchors were added to the path. When you use the horizontal type tool to add text to a path, the letters are going to be perpendicular to the baseline of the path. And if you change the location or the shape of the path, the type is going to move along with it. So we'll go back up here to the model layer, and we want to show any paths that have been previously drawn. So we'll go up here to our window menu, and we will click on the paths panel so that we can see the paths, and we'll see that we have a speech path that's been drawn. So I want to select this, and now we can see that path, which appears to be coming out of the model's mouth. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see this a little bit better. And I'll kind of reposition it a little bit. Let's see, do I even want to? Okay. So we'll go back to our horizontal type tool. And up here in the option bar, we want to right align this. And then in our character panel, which is still open, we're going to choose Myriad Pro Regular. We want to make this much smaller, so we're going to go down to 14 points. Oops. Which is, if you know, 12 points is about like regular typewriter size. So if you look at a magazine, you can kind of see, you can kind of guesstimate what size this would be. And then we want to reduce our tracking. So we want everything much closer. So we're going to make this -10. And the color we're going to change to white. Whoops. And then we want to use all caps. So down here, you can see there's a couple different options here. So we have 14, oops, tracking, we want -10, color white, Myriad Pro, okay. Now, when I move my type tool over the path, you'll see there's a subtle change. Let me do it over here so you can see a little bit better. But when I reach the path, I get a little diagonal line, a little wavy line that appears over the I bar. So I want to click the side of the path that's closest to the model's mouth, and I want to see that diagonal path icon. And once I click, I can start typing, and I'm going to type in what's new with games. Okay, what did I do wrong? I got 14 points. Auto, oops, tracking. It's minus 10. Write a line. Okay. Let me go back a step. Oh, I'm on the wrong. Should be on the top. The only thing I can figure is that maybe
the space, I think they're writing, the letters are writing right on top of each other because the one right below that above the white is at 0.
right. Oh, did I change that to 0? Horizontally scale? No, I don't think.
So that it's basically writing on right on top of each other, I think. Because in the book it shows that it's
There
supposed
you
to be 100%.
You're right. You're right. Somehow I changed that to 0. And I didn't, maybe that was when I was putting in the tracking. I might have hit the wrong arrow, but you're right. Thank you, Tracy. So you guys don't do what I just did, but anyway, make sure, look at the book and make sure that your values here are all the same. And I missed that. I knew something was going on. I could see that first bit of white, and I could see here that the text actually went in, but it wasn't showing up. So thank you, Tracy, for catching that. Okay, so good. Now we have type on a path. We're going to do a little bit of modifying here. We're just going to select the last word and the question mark, and we're going to bold it. So we'll go up here and choose bold and commit that. We're just sort of dressing it up now. And then if you're not already on your layers tab, you want to click on the layers tab to bring it forward. And then with the what's new with games layer selected, we'll duplicate this layer. And you can use the menu here, duplicate layer, or you can click and drag. But if you choose it this way, you can actually change the name at the same time. So what we're going to change this to is music instead of games. So we'll just go ahead and type that in and say OK. And now we have a what's new with music layer, but it is hidden. It is directly over the what's new with games layer. So we will first change that word, and we're going to make it, whoops, share on your type tool. Let me click away from that. Sometimes, there we go. Make this music. We'll commit that. And now we will transform this path. So we're going to move it. So we'll go up to Edit, Transform Path, and we will just free transform. You get that bounding box with the corner handles. And we just want to rotate the left side of this. So when you get the curve with the 2 arrows, you're going to rotate it up about 15 degrees, and you can kind of watch as you rotate it. And then we're going to shift it up above, so you can just put your cursor inside that path and shift it up and a little bit to the right. Okay, and then when you commit it, your text will show up, and you've duplicated that path and that text layer, and then transformed it and repositioned it. So then we're going to do this one more time, and so we will duplicate this layer, and we're going to replace this with phones. So now I have a new layer on top of the music layer. I will, with my text tool still selected, I will click on the word music and replace that with phones. And then I will free transform this path. And now I want to, actually, it would have been easier if I had duplicated games again, because I would have gotten the degrees correct. So let's just see if I can get it to work. I'm going to go 30 degrees and hope that's right. But you would have done, if you followed along in the book, you would have just duplicated the games layer again. But I think this will work. And then I want to place it right below. And when I commit, let's see. Yeah, add a P and bold it. There we go. And then you can fine tune this with just the move tool if you need to. Okay, and then after all that work, it's a good idea to save your file so that nothing happens. And I'll go ahead and fit this on the screen. Oops. Oh. There we go. View, fit on screen, so that we can see what we've done so far. And Sarah, are you still there? Did that answer your question? Or
well, I have all the settings correct, it seems, but it's still not showing up on the picture. I see the layer tag and it says what's new with games, and I've done it like 3 times now. I've tried selecting the path select tool and I still don't see it.
Okay, and your color is white?
Yes.
Okay, what we'll do is let me finish this chapter and then I'll have you share your screen, okay?
Okay.
And we can figure it out.
Thank you.
Are your layers in the same order? So
Yeah.
you would have, like actually.
It goes after the model. It's above the model.
Above the model? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Okay, well that sounds good. So we'll just have to see what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have this text on a curvy path, and now we're gonna make it a little more playful by warping it. So warping will let you distort type to conform to a variety of shapes, pre-made shapes like a wave or an arc. And the warp style that you select is an attribute of the type layer. So you can change the layer's warp style at any time to change the overall shape of the warp. And warp will give you control over the orientation and the perspective of the warp effect. So there are options you can use. So let's see, I want to move this again. I think I'll go ahead and zoom in again for the sake of the video. And then we'll start with what's new with games. I want to right click if I'm using Windows, or control click if I'm using a Mac, which I am. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a menu that pops up, and you want to go all the way down to warp text. And a little dialog box pops up, of course. And when you click this little drop-down menu, you'll see that there are a number of different types of warps. So you can, again, you can experiment with that and just kind of roll through them and see what they are. But we're going to choose wave. So that's going to be, and you can see that it kind of does funny, you know, kind of wavy things with the individual letters, and you can further control these but with the options here. So we'll, and again, just go ahead and play with this. How much do you want it to bend? So we'll go about 33%. Distortion, we're gonna, here's going up, here's going down. We'll go down about 23%. And then vertical distortion, again, this is what happens if you go up, this is what happens when you go down. So we'll just bump it up to about 5. And then click OK, and those changes are applied. And now, instead of doing that, actually you do have to do it to each, and then you can kind of fine tune your changes. So let's go ahead and click on the next layer, which is music. And we will option click or alt, or sorry, just forgot what you guys on Windows, alt or option click. Scroll all the way down to warp text, choose wave. And unfortunately, you have to do this every time it kind of resets, so it doesn't remember your settings. So I'll see if I can remember 23%. And then vertical distortion, I think, is it -5 or +5? Okay, and then I'll do the last, do it with phones. And you can also type these, maybe I should do that this time. So I would type in a -23 here, and then type in 5 here, and then say okay. Then you could just go back, and you would want to just, you know, fine tune these. Okay, again, good time to save your work. Now, everything that we've written so far on this cover has been a few words or maybe, you know, a line. So in other words, point type. Now, sometimes designs call for full paragraphs of text. And you can design complete paragraphs of text in Photoshop. You can even apply paragraph styles. And this is where Adobe has pulled in little bits of InDesign. So we talked about how little bits of Illustrator have been pulled into Photoshop to make it a more robust application where you don't have to leave. And the same, they've done the same with InDesign, so that you don't have to change to a different program to do a little bit of text work and layout work. So we're going to add a few paragraphs, and but first we'll add some guides. So we want to make sure we can see at least the top half of the document, and then we'll drag another guide out from the left vertical ruler, and we'll place it about 1/4 inch from the right side of the cover. So our we're at 8.5 on the right side. So if we pull this over, we'll place it at about 8.25 up there. And then we'll drag another guide down from the top ruler. This will be a horizontal guide, and we'll put it about 2 inches from the top. So you can see the measurements over on the left, and they light up. I just want to get it at 2 inches. And now we're ready to add some text. And so if you're working in the real world, the text might be provided to you from in a word processing document, like Word, or in the body of an email message, which you would copy and paste, or you might have to type it in. And then another easy way to add a bit of text is for the copywriter to attach it to the image in a sticky note, which has been done here. So with the Move tool selected, let's see, I'm going to close this. And I think my sticky note is down at the bottom. There it is. You want to double click the sticky note that's down here at the bottom of your image file. And it's going to open it in the Notes panel. And then if you need to, you can expand this Notes panel so that you can see the entire sticky note and all of the text in it. Within this Notes panel, you want to select all the text. So if it isn't already selected, go ahead and select it. And then Control-C or Command-C to copy all the text to the clipboard. And then you can close the Notes panel. Make sure you're on the Model layer and then choose your Horizontal Type tool. And then you want to find your guidelines. So about a 1/4 inch from the right and 2 from the top is where we're going to start. And you're going to click holding down the Shift key and drag a text box down and to the left. So I'll start there and drag down and to the left. And I want to continue dragging until the box is about 4 inches wide by 8 inches high. So you can see my width and my height here. So I'll go ahead, and if you let go of the Shift key, you'll be able to, the Shift keeps it constrained to a square, but I'm gonna let go now so that I can get that 4 by 8. So it's just about right here in the middle is 4 inches. And then we'll go all the way, probably close to the bottom. Oops, and I can't really see because my little menu for Zoom is in there. So I'm just gonna kind of guess and let go. And the text that we had copied, actually we have some place marker text there. So I'll go Command or Control V to paste the text that we had in the sticky note into this text box that I just drew. So now we have a new layer, layer 1, and it is just above the model layer because that's where that's the layer we were on when we started this whole process. And we have the text copied. So we're going to do some modification to all of this text now and change it up using the character panel. So I will, with my horizontal type tool still selected, I'm going to highlight the first 3 lines, the words, the trend issue, and open up my character panel again, and go ahead and change this to Myriad Pro or some other sans serif font, make it regular. Change the size to 70 points, 70, and the leading I was set to auto, but I now want to change it manually to 55 points. So you can see there's some that are already that you can choose from there, but I'm going to set it at 55. I want my, let's see, tracking to be 50. So they're going to be characters are going to be a little bit farther apart. My alignment is going to be to the right, and it is. And then my color is going to be white. So let's click outside that, and we can see those changes that we just made. And then we'll change just this letter to bold. You can do that up here if you want. So like many things in Photoshop, there are numerous places, numerous ways to do the same thing. And I'm not going to go and do the rest of this. I think you guys can figure out what you need to do with the rest of this text based on what we just did up here. And I don't really want to spend the time. I'd rather take the time at the end of our session here to work with Sarah. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to move on ahead now to adding the volume. So in order to do that, I'm going to add a shape, and then I'm going to put some vertical text in that shape. So up here in the upper right, we're going to create a rectangle with rounded corners. That will be a background for the volume number. So let's zoom in here a little bit, and I'll get this so that you can see it right in here above the L. Over in the tools panel, we have down here in the shape tools, we have a rounded rectangle nested underneath the rectangle tool. So I'll choose that, and I will draw a rectangle in the space above the letter L in the upper right corner, and I want the right edge to be along this guide. So I can start from the guide and kind of drag to the left, and I'll drag down, kind of looking at the book, about this far. Okay, and then let's see, in the properties panel up here, it wants me to give it a specific width of 67 points. So I'll go ahead and change that 3 to a 7 pixels, sorry, not points. And that automatically adjusted the size here. And then in the fill swatch up here in the properties, well, you could be working in the properties panel, or you could be working up here. I'm going to go ahead and work up in the fill, and I want to select a pastel yellow in the third row. CMYK, where's my pastels? Not seeing them. I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, nope. Go make it pastel orange. And we don't want any stroke, so we'll make sure that there is no stroke applied to that. And now we want to change the radius of a couple of these corners, because we don't need rounded corners up here. We want it to sort of just line up with the edge of the magazine cover. So let's see, let me go ahead and open up the tools panel. Sorry, I'm having a mind block again. Somebody who's looking, oh, there we go, properties. Okay, so this is the properties panel for our shape. So in this, I could have changed the color right here. I could have set the width right here, and so on, my stroke, and so on. Now, right now, all the corner radiuses are linked. So if I click that link button, now it means that these corners are no longer linked, and I can change them separately. So I'm going to go ahead and change the bottom left corner right here to 16 pixels. And I'm going to set all the other ones to 0. And you can see on the screen that I'm losing my rounded corners, all except for that one on the left bottom. And then with the move tool, we'll, if it isn't already at the top, you want to drag it so that it hangs down like a ribbon right along that right side guide. And then if it's not long enough, you can drag the bottom of that rectangle down, but it looks pretty good to me right now. And then we'll just click outside to commit those changes. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do now is to add a little bit of vertical text to this ribbon that we just made. So we will deselect all the layers. So none of them are selected over here. And then we're going to choose the vertical type tool, which is nested underneath the horizontal type tool. And holding down the shift key, holding down the shift key will give us a new text box. So we're going to, because we're really close to this word digital, so we don't want to accidentally select that. So hold down the shift key and we will click near the bottom of the rectangle that we created. And we want to type volume 9. And the letters are way too large. So we will select all of them if they're not already selected. And we will, in the character panel, which is over here again, we're going to check that we have a sans serif typeface. And we want to make this a more narrow style, like condensed maybe, or light condensed. And then we want the font size much smaller, so we're going to take it down to about 15. We want the tracking to be closer together, so we'll set that to 10. And then instead of white, we want our colors to be black. So to black there. And then if you need to adjust this a little bit within the ribbon, you can go ahead and do that. Maybe line it up with the top of the letter. And when you're happy with your work, make sure you save it. I think that's, oh, now we're going to clean it up a little bit. So I'll fit this on the screen. And we can delete our sticky note because we don't need it anymore. So just by selecting it, you can right click or control click and delete the note. You can hide the guides. So you can do that by going up to your view, show, and unselecting guides, and they'll go away. And there's your magazine cover. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now. There's a couple more steps in the book, but we don't need to go over that. And have a little bit of time to look at Sarah's work and anyone else who wants to share anything. So let me stop recording.